Great. So what I thought we'd do, I've got this title, Are the Thoughts You're Thinking Yours? Sounds a bit worrying, doesn't it? Yeah. And what I thought I'd do, actually, is throw it back on you to start off with. Throw it back on you and just ask, so what if they are? So what if they're not, rather? So what if the thoughts you're thinking are not yours? What's the issue, actually? What's the issue with that? And I thought we could just start with that in groups, actually, just kind of exploring that sort of key question underlying the title, which presumably you knew the title when you came along, so it might be of some interest to you. I'm assuming that. Yeah, so if we let's just turn into groups of kind of 4 and 5, and just explore that just for about 10 minutes. I'll ring a bell or wave or something at the end of that. Is the question clear enough to everybody? Yeah, great. Great. Okay, so welcome if you just joined. Really good to have you. Yeah, lovely just all to be here together. This is the sub-30s evening, isn't it? And it's the challenge evening. So a warm welcome to anyone who's come to the sub-30s, and also a warm welcome to anyone who is on the challenge, and especially warm welcome to those who coincide with those two categories. Yeah, so my name's Arta Siddi, and we're exploring this question. Are the thoughts you're thinking yours? I think that's right, is it? Yeah, are the thoughts you're thinking yours? At risk of sounding like a sort of paranoid kind of drug thought, it's kind of just asking this question kind of about thinking, really. About thinking. What is it that's important about thinking? So I just wanted to throw it back on you. And we're doing this within the context of on the challenge, the meditation challenge. We're exploring this question of kind of, well, we're exploring the Buddhist vision of human potential and this aspect of kind of thinking within that, the role, if you like, of thinking. What role does it play within that vision? So, what did you come up with in your groups? Maybe if you got good answers, I can go home and leave you to it.
Advertising jingles are not yours. So what we decided.
Advertising jingles are not.
Yeah, are not yours. You don't keep them voluntarily. Someone else.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That is true, isn't it?
Someone else was paid to put them there.
Yeah. That is true. Yeah, it's kind of. It's just a reality, isn't it, of modern life? People have worked out how to get thoughts into your head, and very, very good at it. Yeah. But what is the issue with that, other than the fact that you buy things that you don't need, which is an issue, actually? Yeah.
So where do they come from if they're not yours?
Where do they come from? Yeah, the thoughts. Yeah, usually from other people, isn't it?
Yeah, advertising companies.
Advertising companies, yeah, very good at it. Yeah, indeed. The news. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We pick up thoughts, ideas kind of all the time. We're sort of a little bit sponge-like. It's very, very hard for us to see it, though, because there's something about thinking that feels intimately you, doesn't it? It feels like you are doing it. So the idea that thought is someone else's is like, no, it's not. No, it feels like it's me doing this. But actually, if you're really, really watchful, you can see the process actually of picking up thoughts from, your environment. Quite interesting to see. Quite a little bit unsettling to see, but really, really helpful to see that. Yeah. Hi, Ezra.
Yeah, I really. Yeah, I got moved by this question, and I was thinking, I'm an academic, I write books, and I was thinking, I'm so proud of my thoughts. I'm going to take them away from me.
Yeah.
But then I also thought, I'm also a mother. I'm also so proud of my children.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe it is the same, right? I'm proud of my children, but I know that they're not me and they're not mine.
Yeah.
And I'm, maybe we both nurture our thoughts and our children.
Mm-hmm.
They come, so, sometimes they're vessels and then they go.
Yeah.
So it's not like bad, like they come from advertisements, maybe we also like bring them together, turn them into other thoughts, and then they leave us.
Yeah. Interesting reflection. Thanks, Ezra. Yeah. I mean, I'd wonder if there's two different processes that go on. One is thoughts that we unconsciously absorb and maybe even don't agree with, but are actually thinking. I don't know if you ever caught yourself doing that, thinking a thought, and then you realise, I didn't believe this. Why am I thinking this? I don't actually believe it. We can do that, which is really mad, isn't it? And then also this this more conscious process of actually listening to somebody, receiving a thought, considering it, and actually doing something with it. Sort of creative use of concepts. Sangharakshita, my teacher, what I love with him is he knows where the thoughts he's thinking come from. I'm often not aware. I start thinking a thought, and actually, it's my friend's thought, really. But I just picked it up, and because it's in my head, I think it's mine. I haven't even sort of evaluated it, sort of thing. I'm sort of using it. But I love how he's conscious enough, aware enough to, and good enough memory to actually identify where has this thought come from, identify and appreciate, value the thoughts of others, but not unreflectively. Yeah, thanks, Ezra. Any other conclusions? Anyone want to hazard an opinion about why is it an issue?
I was thinking.
Who's
I
that?
was going to say, we were talking about as well the thoughts that come where it almost feels like an instinct, like a gut, like a visceral environment. Where does this come from? Because I really feel this, but especially it might even be in a situation where something's telling you that something might be dangerous. That, and then we were also talking about inspirational thoughts that come in through creativity, like the flow of that, and how that comes in, it flows, and it feels like it's coming from somewhere, but not necessarily from you. And it could be from an outer source, but you don't necessarily know what or where. When.
Yeah, great. That's brilliant, Anna. Very. There's a lot to talk about, isn't there, with this area of thought? A lot of quite different things. Some quite helpful processes. You say sort of inspirational thoughts, where did they come from? And suddenly it's there, you actually no idea. I mean, of course, you could be duping yourself and you heard it passing someone in the street, yesterday. That can happen, can't it? But there is this process of sort of inspiration where thoughts just sort of come from who knows where into our minds. Yeah, and the other process you mentioned was, that's right. So, sort of, gut instinct.
It's really good. It might be something like a warning.
Yeah.
Almost as a thought that comes in, like, oh.
Yeah. So there's those as well. Great.
We discussed responsibility.
Did you? Yeah.
Like responsibility over our thoughts, and I think an interesting one is sometimes it can feel like you haven't chosen to have the thoughts that you have. Maybe they're from your past, your history, you've been influenced by the environment. But part of maybe accumulating good karma is taking responsibility for your thoughts, choosing the good ones, and kind of bringing compassion to the bad ones so that the negativity or the negative emotion fueling it doesn't lead to bad action. Sometimes even if you don't feel like you want to identify with all of your thoughts because they're not yours, you should still take responsibility for them because you're the only one who sees them.
Yeah, very good. Thanks. It's Tanya. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. So there's a couple of really important points you're making there, isn't there, about sort of taking responsibility. even though those thoughts might not be your fault, it might not be your fault in a way that you're thinking those thoughts. They might have arisen from circumstances in the past that were beyond your control, but now you have those particular habitual thoughts. At the same time as them being not your fault, they are our responsibility. It's only us that can actually do anything about those thoughts. You can't sort of push them onto someone else, and they will not do anything about them. They might want to, but they can't. So really crucial. And then you also make a connection with action, didn't you? That actually those thoughts will lead us to act. They will lead us to act, and it's our actions that shape our life, shape how our consciousness unfolds or contracts. That's what Buddhism essentially is saying. So perhaps we'll just unfold this. I'll just unfold this a little bit more, and then we'll meditate. We'll kind of explore this in experience a bit more. But just exploring a little bit this point about thought sort of governing our actions. We can see that, can't we? That happens. At the same time, there's times when they don't, like our opinions. We can kind of voice our opinions. We can have opinions, can't we? And you can see that other people have opinions. Maybe they're aligned with a particular sort of political position. But their actions don't accord with that. Have you ever noticed that in yourself or with others? Someone was trying to persuade me that they were kind of pro-left because they were sort of people orientated. Though I don't know whether they're conservatives orientated, for example, and they're people too. Sometimes they seem not to be. So I wasn't entirely convinced by that argument, but we can kind of adopt that. So sometimes it's a bit like our thinking belies our action belies our thinking. There's a divide, isn't there, sometimes between our action and our thinking. So it's not always true that our thoughts kind of govern our actions. Actually, sometimes our opinions, oftentimes our opinions are at variance in some part of our life. Anyway, just to make that distinction. So what is happening there where there is a divide? Why is it we're not just rational kind of machines, where we have this thought and then we do that action? Well, Buddhism, we were talking last night in the class about this word prapuncha. And prapuncha is a really, really helpful word for thinking. Because it's identifying a particular sort of thinking that is really unhelpful. We don't have a word quite like that, quite as precise in English. So in Triratna, we just adopt that word. It's quite a nice word, isn't it, prapuncha, because it sort of sounds a bit repetitive. And that's what it's talking about. It's talking about kind of automatic thinking. Sometimes it's really noticeable, isn't it? You're thinking something, you decide to stop, and then you find you're thinking it again. That's because you're not thinking, you're being thought. So that's what prapuncha is. You're actually being thought. So you think that you can be quite proud of the content, and you're trying to stop, and you realise actually it's just an automatic process. So what prapuncha is we've had a thought, and then it's fallen into the sort of underlying patterns, the underlying habits of our mind. Our minds are a bit like they've got grooves in them. If we think that thought, it digs, it just like water, it kind of starts to create a groove if we keep thinking it. Modern science has kind of proved this, hasn't it? Yeah, so that's what prapuncha is. Even though we're there thinking, I'm doing the thinking here, that's actually sort of self-flattery. We're not really with prapuncha. We're actually kind of being thought. It's kind of passive. It's a passive process that we sort of kid ourselves that we're in control of. It's actually automatic, not sort of self-willed, not conscious. Yeah, that's what prapuncha is. So yeah, prapuncha. Well, these grooves. There are sort of particular stories that we tend to sort of go to. It's a bit like what we're actually doing a lot of the time is kind of pattern matching. It's not really thinking. We've got a particular story of how life works out, how our life works out, how I am, how others are, and we just, when we initiate thought, we just get that pattern and we throw it over the current circumstances and kind of force a fit. See what I mean? That's actually kind of what we're doing with prapuncha. So we're not actually very careful to verify, is this actually fact? We're more concerned to kind of squeeze the facts to fit the pattern. Yeah. So it's really, really helpful, slightly sort of foreign to us actually as Westerners, to think about our minds in this way, and therefore perhaps all the more helpful actually, this term prapuncha. So one of the sort of, if you like, sets of underlying tendencies that our thoughts are prey to, prapunchas prey to, is just our sort of group tendencies, this evolutionary inheritance that we've got, that actually we've survived because we can form into groups, runs all the way back into our evolution, doesn't it? So actually, this is part of why we're so good at absorbing ideas. We just kind of very easily pick up ideas from other people that we sort of feel are in our kind of identity group. Of course, today it's a bit tricky to sort of see this because we don't live in tribes, that all have, and we're sort of picking up views. If I'm asked, okay, who are your groups? I sort of don't know actually. Society's sort of broken up, hasn't it? Fragmented. But actually, we do have groups. We probably just don't know who they are. It could be a sort of political allegiance, for example, that you just sort of align, your thinking naturally aligns with that particular grouping, and you don't even quite know it. So it's quite hard for us to see this these days, but at times it can suddenly become apparent, particularly when you meet someone of an opposing group and actually you find yourself sort of really threatened or really, kind of overreacting. If you had that sort of response, well, that's because it's not merely your thinking that's being challenged, it's your group identity. It's your identity that's being challenged. So you feel your very existence is being threatened. Yeah. So these are some of the underlying patterns that our thinking processes fall into unawares when we're in prapuncha, this sort of passive, unaware, automatic kind of thinking. So I want to draw on a way that Sangharaj has talked about. Well, a teaching that he's talked about that Maitri Kumara drew on last week, which is this teaching of the group, the individual, and the spiritual community. And here, what I've evoked in Prapuncha is kind of how group consciousness kind of functions. It will sort of automatically align with thinking of people within our group, and that one of the consequences of that is division. That we actually sort of clump into groups. That is actually, it's all very nice in the group, but when you encounter another group, it's that you actually discover its division. So in that way, we sort of create a divided society. That's the inevitable consequence of this level of consciousness, this mode of consciousness. But it's more than that. It's not kind of really bad. It's natural, actually, that we will function in that sort of way. It's not a bad thing. It's not something to recriminate yourself about. Perhaps we can be a bit in the West, so that's rather groupish, as though, I'm not. But that's not that helpful. It's not that self-aware, actually. That is just our natural tendency that arises from our evolutionary inheritance. But the thing about it is that it undermines our fulfillment. That's the thing, that we will end up acting in ways that are not very fulfilling. They will sort of look after us kind of socially. We will find ourselves in groups, but actually we won't really live our lives. We won't really sort of fulfill and sort of live from ourselves. So one of the ways of discovering this is go on solitary retreat. It's a really, really fascinating practice. I was on solitary retreat in July for 3 weeks. Keeping an eye on time, and it's so fascinating. My life is very, very populated. Actually, working at the centre, it's a brilliant life. I love it. But who am I when I'm taken out of that situation? I'm up a mountain in Spain all by myself. That is where I really get a sort of reliable test of kind of who I am. And actually, how fulfilling is my life? Because very easily, we can kind of run along, sort of governed by these underlying habits, quite sort of, happy that we're sort of socially secure and getting on well. But you go on solitary retreat, and you've got this kind of real touchstone of, is that enough? Actually, what does my life amount to, aside what other people think of me? Yeah, because that's really the kind of underlying preoccupation of group consciousness. What do other people think of me? My value is measured in the eyes of others. When you take those others away, you're left with your life, and how much are you sort of living your life? So that's where this next level of consciousness kind of emerges. So we actually talked in terms of the true individual, being a true individual. And he distinguishes that from the individualist, which merely sort of is someone who's managed to monopolize. It's basically group consciousness, but you've managed to sort of monopolize resources. It's a kind of monopoly. Whereas the individual so this is an important point about the individual, because it could be misunderstood as kind of isolation, sort of isolating yourself from other people. That's not what's being got at. It's actually a new mode of relating. That's what's being pointed to by this term, the individual. It's a new mode of relating that is not governed by these unconscious tendencies, this unconscious concern, preoccupation with how I am seen in the eyes of others. That's really kind of what's being got at. So the kind of key attitude of the individual is this attitude of responsibility, really taking responsibility for your own life. That's what you're thrown back on when you go on solitary retreat. No one else is going to find out what you're doing. You could, they could ask you, but you could just lie, couldn't you? You'll never find out. Yeah, but you're pushed back on yourself into your own experience. And what does my life sort of amount to when I'm just pushed back on myself? So, yeah, something else, another kind of consciousness can start to arise when we take ownership for our lives. Maitreya Bandhu puts it in terms of kind of living from yourself. You can, there's something evocative about that phrase, isn't there? Living from yourself. Too much of our lives, we're sort of not actually. We're perhaps not even in contact with kind of what's going on in our body. We're so sort of overstimulated and rushing around hoping that we'll be seen as we hope to be seen, that we're not even really experiencing ourselves sort of from ourselves. Yeah. So that's the starting point. That's where we start to step into this level of consciousness, or this mode of relating of individuality. Yeah, so he actually identifies kind of two basic qualities. One is this responsibility or ownership, sort of living from ourselves, and the other he terms intelligence. So I'll talk about that second one a little bit more in a moment. Yeah, but perhaps another way of talking about this, this kind of mode we're stepping away from by stepping into ownership of our lives, is we're stepping away from kind of justification. We sort of, actually a lot of our thinking can be about justifying ourselves to ourselves, justifying our life, justifying my value. And we're sort of doing that to other people as well with our thinking. We're sort of verbalizing our thinking. And actually, if we just sort of really take responsibility for our life, that can drop away. We can actually be less concerned with needing to sort of justify ourselves. Again, it's this preoccupation, isn't it, with how we're seen in the eyes of others. It's very, very understandable. It's just, it will govern how you act and lead to a sort of an unfulfilledness. So just in that area, I love this this quote. Here's something about us sort of feeling we need to justify ourselves. One of the ways I justify myself is by what I do. Am I kind of useful to others? Kind of being useful. Listen to this. What do you make of this? Someone came to me once and said that he did not feel that he could be very useful because he had no particular talent. I told him, think of yourself as an unspecialized human being. People think that if they can't make themselves useful in some way, they can't type, they can't keep accounts, they can't cook, they can't write or give a talk or paint or play a musical instrument, there's something wrong with them. But consider, this apparently useless human being is a product of millions upon millions of years of evolution. You are the goal. You are what it has all been for. You don't have to justify your existence for being useful, by being useful. You yourself are the justification for your existence. You haven't come into existence after all these millions of years of evolution just to sit down in front of a typewriter or keep accounts. You are the justification of that whole process. You are the end in yourself. All that can really be said to be here for is, I'll start that sentence again. All that you can really be said to be here for is to develop into some higher form of human life, to become a bodhisattva, to become a Buddha. So don't be ashamed of sitting around and doing nothing. Glory in it. Do things spontaneously, out of a state of inner satisfaction and achievement. It is a virtue to be ornamental as well as useful. So isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? And it gets to something, doesn't it? We sort of know that. We know that's true. And that is what we're tuning into when we meditate. We're just trying to go deeper into just this experience of being alive, that somehow you can feel the very vibrations of your experience, that this is its own justification. You need no further and that is a starting point for this shift in consciousness of individuality. We can start, if we get in touch with that, we can start to withdraw our concern from preoccupation with how others see ourselves. In meditation, we close our eyes. Am I bothered? We're not bothered, are we? You're going to close your eyes, or at least that's the sort of image. Yeah. So what I thought we could do is actually just meditate a bit together and try and just get in touch with that. This sense of taking ownership of your own life, your own miracle of self-consciousness. That's another kind of angle into this, is that we start to feel sort of intrinsic inner purpose, dropping justification and getting in touch with this sort of intrinsic sense of purpose, not even articulated, just felt. So when you're ready, closing your eyes, maybe Alice, would you just turn the lights down a touch? Thanks. So let's not get into any sort of worthy, useful sort of mode of self-improvement. Just relax that urge if it's there, to feel you need to justify yourself in any way. Let's instead just tune in to this moment. Of being aware. Just feeling the vibration of awareness, attending to your physical experience. So dropping any sense of needing to be any different. Or justification, just tuning into how you are in this moment. And you might, as you tune in deeper and deeper, notice little winces of thinking that should be different. So just keep a sense of humour. See if you can relax that tendency just comes from our evolutionary inheritance. It's probably more concerned with how others see us. And let's see if we can tune in more and more to our own experience. So just feeling what your mood is. Open to whatever it is. It's totally fine as it is. For now, it will change. And then let's start to become aware of sensations of breathing. Again, not kind of grabbing at them in some sort of utilitarian way. Let's just be open, discover where in the body you're feeling the breath. Is it in the belly or the chest? The left of the belly or the right of the belly more prominent? And watching out for any need to justify instead just glorying in this capacity for awareness. And let's just see if we can follow the breath, prolong our attending to the sensations of breathing through the whole of the in-breath, the whole of the out-breath, just as a way of taking us deeper into our experience, so that we can really feel what's going on with us, besides the story we tell about ourselves and what might be going on. And if you've got bits of prapancha arising, that's great. It's all part of the process. See if you can feel what's going on underneath that automatic thinking in the body. So often our distractions, our prapancha, can be just trying to hide from our actual experience. Distract ourselves from becoming aware of how we actually are. So if you like, you can just be curious when you get distracted. As to if it's a subtle evasion. And we can just feel the gentle massaging motion of the breath, sort of soothing and calming all those fretful tendencies that we have naturally. And see if you can sense that natural purpose, sort of inner purpose or meaning, sort of intrinsic to this process of taking responsibility, ownership of our experience. And then as we come towards the end of this short practice, just dropping any effort you're making and just see what happens in your body and in your mind when you drop the effort. Let's go for a tea break. Great, okay. Well, I hope perhaps we've, I don't know about answered, but touched on this area of are the thoughts you're thinking yours, at least. That very often they're not, and we're not quite aware, even quite aware of that. But they're thoughts that are, we're sort of, because of our underlying tendencies, we will end up thinking thoughts that are not our own, or thoughts that sort of emerge from our past, sort of stories, habitual sort of stories, that we don't even particularly agree with. So that is normal. That's often what's happening if we have a look, called prapuncha. A natural sort of unaware state of thinking that is the domain of what we're here calling sort of group consciousness, this level of consciousness. But I don't know if we've fully sort of answered this question of does it matter? Does that actually matter? And perhaps that's sort of answered a bit more in this exploration of the individual, becoming an individual. When I was on solitary retreat, I sort of left with my experience, and my life was sort of boiled down to, well, what does matter actually? And this seemed to be the one thing that mattered actually. Am I growing into becoming an individual or not? That seems to be what it sort of boils down to, of sort of crucial importance in life. And here we've got this quality of intelligence being enumerated as one of the key qualities of an individual. I'll be honest, I couldn't think for the life of me what was being got at. It's such a broad term, isn't it? Intelligence. What exactly is being got at here? So I hope to explore that a bit more. I'm not getting distracted. Reading text. Yeah, so it might be helpful to talk about what's not being got at a bit. Yeah, with this term intelligence, before talking about what is being got at. Yeah, because intelligence is something we sort of prize fairly highly, don't we, in the West? So what's not being got at is that sort of utilitarian intelligence, IQ, that can be sort of utilized, in our jobs, in a commercial environment. Sort of finding solutions to kind of particular problems. People can be absolutely brilliant at that, and not intelligent in this definition, in this sort of particular meaning that we're using here. So it's not necessarily just sort of our capacity for kind of clear logical thinking that's been got at here. Yeah, useful as that can be, you can actually be kind of highly intelligent in that sort of way and emotionally all over the place, can't you? You can meet people like that. I'm not intelligent enough to be one of those people. I can be emotionally all over the place, but yeah. There's one of the things that can go on with thinking is something that I don't know whose quote this is actually, but we can just have a sort of mania for explanation. We just want to be able to explain everything, sort of for fear of not knowing what's going on. We can't sit with the fact that actually we don't understand everything. So we have to sort of explain it. Really interesting if you catch someone in that mode, because once they've got it explained, they're not interested. Yeah, so they'll insist they're really, really interested in understanding this particular area. They understand it and drop, onto something else. So that's another thing that we're not talking about. We're not just talking about the capacity to be able to explain. That can actually be avoidant. It can be propuntia. So these are all examples of propuntia, whether it be sort of driven by kind of utilitarian need, which is based in our kind of, our status at work or our use at work, or whether it be a sort of unconscious inability, sort of discomfort with not understanding what's going on. That's the sort of underlying kind of tendency that's driving that sort of mania for explanation. Yeah, so as I say, thinking to avoid uncertainty, thinking to avoid the issue, we can actually do that, can't we? We can think and come up with some conclusion to avoid taking responsibility for the issue. At some level, we know that the conclusion we come to is not quite consonant with the situation or the experience. But we can do that, can't we? You can catch yourself, and of course that's propuntia, isn't it? It's driven by this unconscious desire not to know, but masquerading as wanting to know. Yeah, we can think in a way that's so abstracted from experience that it's, well, we're not talking about that basically. It's very easy to get abstract. Sometimes I can get very abstract, but what am I actually talking about? So this kind of intelligence that we're talking about is kind of it's sort of applied to experience. It's based in experience. That's what we're talking about with this intelligence, the ability to actually sort of think intelligently about the experience of life that we're actually having. Yeah, that's really what we're talking about. There's a bit more to it. Yeah, and that is that this intelligence is actually sort of based in values. It's based in values. We might think of thinking as like a sort of rational capacities, sort of separated off from our valuing, our emotional kind of faculty. Really, really interesting that that seems not to be the case. It seems that actually we cannot think without the involvement of our emotional faculties. That I've been reading this book, which I found really, really interesting, actually called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, if that's how you pronounce it, Haidt. And he quotes some findings of patients who have been brain damaged. They've lost the, I'll get the right term here. The VMPFC, which is, well, the PFC is a prefrontal cortex, and the VM stands for. Thank you. That's what's wonderful about teaching in Cambridge. You know? I've probably got three PhDs in the subject. So that is the part of the brain that's responsible for kind of emotional response. So those people have absolutely no emotional response to, you know, if you present them with a horrific scenario, a horrific image or something, absolutely no response whatsoever. And what they found is, you know, but their rational faculties entirely intact. Their IQ, in some cases, high. And they, when they looked at their lives, they were incapable of applying themselves even to merely organisational decision making. It actually goes further than that they actually sort of ended up either making terrible decisions in their lives or no decisions in their lives, and falling out with their nearest and dearest. So isn't that really, really interesting that actually this thing that we call thinking, that is so intimate to us, that you would think we would understand how it works, but we don't, is actually not sort of abstracted from thinking, from feeling. It doesn't actually work without feeling. Just as propuntia is driven by underlying emotional tendencies, we might think we're just being merely rational. We're not. But so too is this intelligence. Yeah. So this is how I'm distinguishing the kind of useful thought thinking from unhelpful thinking. But both are based in emotion. Yeah. So with the individual, this intelligence is kind of based in values. Now we just need to be a little bit careful about how we use that word values, because very easily values can be sort of, you know, badges of allegiance. I'm an inclusive person, or, you know, for example, and actually what values are really about is something beyond us. It's something beyond us that we look up to, that we aspire to live by, but know that we can't. That's what we're really getting at with values. They're often something that's discovered rather than chosen. You discover that you feel really strongly about a particular value, because most of our lives we live sort of slightly divorced from our values. Being in contact with values is challenging because it's another way of talking about growing. So the individual is someone who is growing. Yep, but I'd rather keep away from my values, because then I don't have to sort of grow and change and face the challenges of life. That's actually sort of more how we function. Anyway, so just to say that, that's what's meant by values. It's something kind of beyond us. So intelligence is kind of based in experience, and kind of, as Maitreya Bandhu put it, invalued thought. Actually what we're talking about is not, it's more centrally human than kind of your IQ or being clever or something like that. It's more kind of centrally human, more humbling perhaps, more a matter of kind of solitude. It's something that we're approaching by in and through meditation, actually sort of getting closer to what actually is your experience of life, so that we can actually think about it intelligently. So we're not just trying to go deeper and deeper into our experience, but that is the starting point, to know what we're actually experiencing. But we're not sort of stuck in that experience, the Maitreya Bandhu image, like a fly to fly paper. This intelligence gives us the capacity to actually look at our experience and see how we can go somewhere with it. Yeah, instead of being stuck in our experience, actually we can grow as human beings, which is what we most deeply want to do, what we most deeply desire. So this left me remembering experience from solitary retreat, which is why I've been talking about solitary retreat, which was that when I was on solitary, what started to bubble up was some level of kind of discontent, sort of upset actually, which initially I didn't know what it was about, but I was just sort of left with this sort of slight feeling of kind of slight sort of irksome kind of feeling, and it gradually dawned on me that it was about something that happened about 5 years ago, which was to do with the chair process. I put myself forward for chair of the Cambridge Buddhist Centre, and the process was a little bit, not majorly, but a little bit clumsy, and I was sort of on the end of that. I actually consequently sort of withdrew from the process. It wasn't really the fault of anyone in particular. There were sort of some things that could have been done that would have made it sort of smoother, but it was a sort of confluence of a number of circumstances. It just so happened that I was sort of on the end of that, and so I sort of withdrew from that process. Unfortunately, I didn't get away with my. I didn't save face because they didn't catch the email where I withdrew, and they carried on and decided I wasn't going to be chair anyway. But it came back. And I was left with this sort of sense of upset. What is it about? And I'd been telling myself I was upset because the process was a little bit clumsy. And somehow something opened up. And I realized, hang on a minute, I don't think it is that. I think it's something else. And what it really was, actually, was just facing the experience of unpopularity. That's what it was, that I was sort of upset by that, but I wasn't allowing that into my awareness with the story that I was telling myself as to why I was upset by it. Yeah. So that's more what we're talking about with intelligence, actually. It goes a bit further than that, but it's based in experience, in human experience, rather than kind of leaping over for some unknown reason, unknown to yourself, coming up with some grand theory that's not really based in experience. Why are we thinking like that? What is actually driving that thinking? Is that just prapunsha? Or is that actually based in human experience? Not necessarily exclusively one's own human experience, but probably predominantly. It might be other people's kind of human experience. But yeah, so that's more what we mean by this intelligence. But as I say, it's more than that. It's also kind of, how do I feel about that? How do I feel about approaching life in that sort of way? Sort of slightly unconscious to me, a sort of concern about popularity. How do I actually feel about approaching life like that? Yeah. So it's also this is the sort of value based aspect of intelligence as we mean it here. I don't feel that that's really how I want to live. Actually, that isn't really how I want to live. So this is more what we're talking about, and this is more what's being got at with this quality of the individual, of intelligence. And can you see how easy it is to do other things and how easy it is to avoid these things? Actually, in that moment, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was like there I was, so far away from anybody, quietly in my own hut, thinking these thoughts without any need to justify myself. This lovely sort of experience of what kind of freedom, actually, freedom to really look at my life and how I'm living and how I want to live. That might sound like a bit of an arduous sort of task, but actually the experience of it, it's like, it's difficult to sort of quite describe actually, but it's like I was accountable to nobody. I was doing it purely out of some sort of intrinsic sense of inner purpose. It's not, I know that's not personal to me. It's sort of, it's natural to consciousness. It's natural to consciousness that actually if we take the effort to sort of organize our lives to deepen our experience into individuality, do things like go on solitary retreat, then that starts to emerge. But it just felt sort of, liberating, intrinsically sort of worthwhile. Anyway, so I hope in some way that answers this question of what is a value with thinking. What was noticeable to me was in that thought, nobody else could reach it. You know, my friends could possibly say, well, is that actually, the reason why you're upset? But that wouldn't necessarily convince me. You see what I mean? It's only me who can actually reach that thought that is entirely sort of inaccessible to anything but this intelligent thought. Yeah. And what's more, that is utterly pivotal in terms of the sort of, how do you put it, the kind of value of my life. It's a moment where my life can actually point towards an unfolding, a development, or stay stuck, kind of cramped, confined in sort of, very natural human desire to want to be liked and popular, that sort of group tendency. So there's something about thought that's absolutely pivotal in the kind of value of our lives. Yeah. So that's kind of that's what's sort of being got at by this. Yeah. So I hope in a way this is sort of distinguished kind of two quite distinct sort of functionings of thought. One driven by underlying tendencies, the other based in values and trying to, well, a response to values, wanting to live up to those values. Yeah, and on the basis of that, really sort of looking into our experience, but not being stuck in it, actually being able to kind of go somewhere with it. My life in some way feels like I've sort of dropped some sort of weight. I've jettisoned it, it's gone overboard, and I feel sort of freed up and buoyed up. It's not finished. I'm not the finished article by any means. But anyway, so that, I hope that example is sort of helpful in some way. So easy to get into justification. Yeah, that's what I was doing, really. Didn't realise it, but we're so easily persuaded by it. We'll persuade ourselves and we'll persuade others. Actually, if you're interested in this book says that is how our thinking developed. Our thinking developed not to discover the truth, but to persuade people, including ourselves, which is really, really interesting thesis. Anyway, I don't want to quote too much from it because I'm still reading it. Yeah. Great. So what I thought we could do, I thought we'd do a bit more meditation actually, but maybe I'll just sort of pause there and just see if there's any questions kind of bubbling up.
I have a thought, and
Yeah.
does it feel very lonely to be yourself?
Yeah. Good question.
What did you ask?
Does it feel very lonely to be yourself? Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Matthew, yeah, thanks for bringing that in. Yeah. So I think maybe it's helpful to distinguish between loneliness and aloneness, because actually we are alone. Existentially, we're alone. This has been sort of dawning on me more and more, just how unique we all are. Actually, there is nobody else exactly like me in the universe. I mean, that's not something to get conceited about because it's true for everybody. Yeah, but actually that is our lot. And we can kind of try and fit in, and that will in some ways assuage that sense of being aloneness, but not really actually, because you'll never feel yourself. We don't fit actually, that's sort of the point. So what we do with this group level of consciousness is we make a compromise. We sort of won't fully be ourselves so that we're not alone. So yes, in a way, there we are meditating. You're meditating, you're sort of stepping into your aloneness, aren't you? Really. But as I say, the individual is a mode of relating. So what that means is you can come into contact much, much more fully with other unique individuals. That's what becomes available. And you cannot do that from within group consciousness. You're threatened by that. You want to follow the rules. How do we function in this particular sort of kind of group? That's the mode of engagement. So in a way, you become sort of less alone, but it means or less lonely, I would say, but more alone. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Ezra.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've asked too many questions. I'm so excited tonight. I am thinking that if we can make these discoveries in relationships also, kind of imagining, solitary retreat, how amazing it sounds. But for a mother or for someone who has care responsibilities, it sounds so luxurious. Who can afford it? Right then you have the image of the male monk who is devoid of all responsibilities. But hopefully these teachings are for everyone. So if you cannot, coming here is even a huge luxury for a lot of people. How can we do it while in these care duties and relationships?
Well, I think you can. I think you can, and I know that because I know plenty of women who do that, who do go on solitary retreat, despite having parenting responsibilities. So I think it still is possible to do that. Life is repeatedly going to kind of get in the way in all sorts of ways, but it still is kind of possible. Actually, it's probably cheaper than most people's holidays, for example. So yeah, I think it is. Well, I know it is possible for many people. It might not be possible for everybody in all circumstances, but you'd have to sort of look at the circumstances. How can you make that possible? I think it's also true that it's not. I'm just talking about one example. And they are very helpful, solitary retreats, but it's not the only way to do this. Actually, meditating is a way of moving towards this. But you'd have to look at the individual and then get into dialogue with them as to and see what the options are for them. But the Buddha taught a whole range of lifestyles. So it's not, the Buddha's teaching is not defined by lifestyle. He's saying actually anybody can become a true individual. Yeah. But the question of how needs to be worked out in the individual's case. Yeah. Thanks. It's really important point that. Yeah, because the Buddha was concerned to reach everybody who wanted to become an individual. Yeah.
Sorry. I was going to say something.
You were going to say something.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I found that a really interesting comment. And I sometimes, I don't know, I just had like a kind of insight a couple of years ago that it feels like the point in your life at which you get to experience this insight doesn't actually matter. Maybe from a kind of deterministic sense of like the whole thing is already there and you're just moving like along the world line of the experience. So, if now you're a mother and these are your responsibilities and you haven't got the space for your consciousness to unfold in a solitary retreat, that could just be part of your path, and the diligence with which you practice within your capacity, if that's for 10 years, just, still focusing on childcare duties and mainly practicing like compassionate practice rather than something else very solitary. It might be later in your life that you come to this experience where you really can have the unfolding, and the strength and the depth of the unfolding will still be kind of nurtured and supplied by the diligent practice beforehand, even if it wasn't excessive. So I don't know. I think there's also this point that everybody's paths are different.
Yeah, that's it.
And yeah, I don't know if anybody else experiences sort of like time indeterminacy, or just, I don't know, like a kind of a real sense of comfort with you're not rushing anywhere. There's nowhere for you to get. There's no way you can make the time pass any quicker. There's no way you can really change anything. You just pretty much just keep relaxing as much as you can in your circumstance, and you'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
I find it also very interesting comments.
Yeah.
Working a lot, it's taking away the meditation time. It just, I think, related to both of what you're saying is something also I've been thinking about, like, to what extent is the aloneness a necessity? Like, what I've been finding is, how can I find this within my relationships? I think that's a lot bigger question, or how can I explore this in contact with others in the moment? I think it's a way bigger question, but I think if you're in a caring role, or if you're...
You can, and that's what I'm getting at with the point that what's not being talked about is that the individual is isolated or separate. So you need to move into aloneness, but not loneliness. And as I say, it can be, well, it will be an invigoration of your relatedness rather than a diminishment of it. Another way of talking about that is friendship. friendship is sort of the relationship of the individual, the true individual, this sort of fully taking responsibility for oneself, in order that one can actually relate on a basis of love rather than on a basis of sort of unspoken exchange, sort of bargaining. Yeah. And solitary retreat is a way to move to, it's one practice, which is a way to sort of move towards that. Actually, if we can't be with ourselves, we can't be with other people in this sort of fully alive, fully responsive to the other person sort of a way. Yeah. Yeah, so what's being talked about is possible in theory in any situation. It's natural to consciousness. As I say, you have to sort of get into dialogue as to how you as a particular individual with your particular circumstances can approach that. Yeah, can move towards that. Yeah. Yeah, so it is relational. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Should we do a spot of meditation? Unless there's any other burning. Yes, Luke.
I was just going to mention that, like, especially in the book I'm reading by Lama Surdas right now, is he mentions like the Buddha's talks a lot about actually the service in line with the meditation, and that one is as important as the other, and that like brings people back to realize that the meditation isn't just going within, but it's also that service aspect, like you're saying, in every moment, especially in the workplace. There's always, like, every moment, every time you interact with someone, there's always steps to like how we're responding to them, like who am I in this space, and like looking at that and focusing at that. Because in a paragraph I read the other day, he was talking about the householders and the women in particular, like India especially. It's very, very different, but they have even less time. But he was saying, make your meditation going to the well to collect the water, take the water back to the children, doing the housework, make that your meditation.
Yeah, that's it. Great. Okay. Well, let's just dive back into meditation. And we'll do the mindfulness of breathing again. And we'll just explore moving between what's called breath and focus. So the focus being the sensations of breathing, and the breath being the whole experience of the body, in the midst of which our focus is the breath. So again, when you're ready, closing your eyes. So tuning in to how you are right now. Noticing any difference from when you last closed your eyes? So just having this openness to your experience. Particularly based in the body. So noticing where sensations of the body are really vivid or most vivid. And then see if you can extend your awareness beyond those regions, expand into the regions of the body that are a bit dull. So just feeling the dullness. In this way, becoming more and more aware of the body, sensations of the body. And alert to anything that's telling you about your mood. Alert to the weather, current weather of your thoughts. And letting it all be what it is. It's all just information about how you're feeling right now, how your mind is right now. So let's just see if we can keep this attitude of openness to there being more going on in our experience than what we currently think. And the breath is guiding us deeper into experience. So starting to feel where you experience the breath in the body. See if you can take the time to really feel that. And then just seeing if you can prolong your attending to those sensations by using the counting in the first stage after the out-breath. So see if you can stay connected with the sensations of the whole of the in-breath, the whole of the out-breath, and if so, count 1. If not, start again. So before we enter the second stage, just broaden your awareness out through the whole body. Open to the information in the body and anything new it's telling you about how you actually are. And then finding or resting the focus of your attention in the sensations of breathing again in stage 2, counting before the in-breath. So again, broadening your awareness through the whole body at the start of stage 3. Open to the information about how you actually are now. And then we drop the counting, follow the whole of the in-breath, the whole of the out-breath. And you might be able to just think into your experience, identifying what's going on with you, and basing that in values. How do you actually feel about that? Being really open, completely free of justification, concern about what others think. How do you feel? You don't need to be discursively thinking. It's just one thought pointing you into your experience. And as we come towards the end of the practice, now dropping the effort. So we've come to the end of our evening, our time together. I hope it's been stimulating, giving you kind of stuff to think about, more thoughts. Oh no!
Who are they? Who are they?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, lovely to explore this all with you all together. Wishing you all well, those of you on the challenge. And next week, Maitri Kumar is going to be taking us just a little bit further in this exploration of the Buddhist vision of human development. So do come on to that, that'd be really good. Maitri Kumar.